This is Barbara Reiss reporting for Totally East Brunswick. Thank you for joining us today. We're very fortunate to have in studio 3 members of our Clergy Council. Joining us today is Rabbi Eric Milgrim, Rabbi of the Temple B'nai Shalom in East Brunswick, Reverend Susan Rack of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation, and Father Mark of St. Mary Coptic Orthodox Church. Thank you for joining us. So, Reverend Rack, perhaps you could tell us, for those who are not familiar with the Clergy Council, what is the purpose of the council? For it's been around a long time.
It has, and the Clergy Council in East Brunswick is organized to connect all the different congregations and religious institutions in the township of East Brunswick. It's been around for a long time, well preceding my time here serving in East Brunswick, and we come together throughout the year in fellowship to support one another, but specifically to provide services back to the community. A particular highlight, of course, is our annual community Thanksgiving service, where everyone comes together, the entire community and all the faith traditions, to offer a time of gratitude and reflection every year. And we've been doing that for how long now, Eric?
Well, I have to begin with a personal story in that I became the spiritual leader of our synagogue in April of 1973. And the first year I commuted from northern Jersey down to East Brunswick on a weekly basis. And on the weekends over Shabbat, I stayed down here in East Brunswick and only moved here in August of 1974. Once we moved here, members of the clergy reached out to me, and I began reaching out to them. There was no clergy association at that time, and we got to know each other, and then we decided that we would like to start meeting, and the minister from Trinity Presbyterian Church, and the minister from Aldersgate Methodist Church, and United Church of Christ, and I initially began to meet, and then it expanded, and then it took us almost a year to formalize one another, so that I believe that our first Thanksgiving service was in November of 1975. So we're about 37 years old.
So for those of us who are just learning about the council, how many members of clergy are on the council, and how do they become involved?
We're rather informally organized, so we don't have a membership roster that we require you to sign up for. However, all clergy leaders from faith traditions throughout the township of East Brunswick are invited to be part of this. I think we have probably a dozen who are truly active and committed, and with that we can count on to show up for everything that we do, and probably another 10 who are around the edges, but we keep attempting to draw them in and become more active, and we'll continue to do that. And each time a new religious leader comes into the community, because there are transitions all the time, the Clergy Council reaches out to that person and lets them know that we exist and what we're here for and how to get involved with us.
So now, Father Mark, how you've been on the council, what are some of the achievements that you see of the council?
Well, I've been actually a member for 7 years right now since I've been ordained. I was ordained in 2005, but our church also, before my ordination, they were participating, Father Antonius and Father Bishoy Dimitri. They were actually a member of the council, and Father Michael Tobia. They always been a member. They come, especially, we love the prayer, the Thanksgiving prayer, get together. It's one of the activities that we always love every year, to get together and pray together. I feel we are different, but we are one. And that's one of the main goals of this activity here. And that's one thing we'll love it. It's just being together and being one, that's something very important.
Having attended the service myself several times, it's a beautiful service and a meaningful one. Are there other activities throughout the years that you look back fondly at that is an achievement of the Clergy Council, Rabbi?
Well, there are different types of activities. As Reverend Rack mentioned, that we do get together on a periodic but regular basis for friendship and fellowship. Sometimes we break bread together. Sometimes we study with one another. And sometimes we just share common thoughts and common concerns. The East Brunswick Clergy Association gave birth to other East Brunswick institutions. I mean, in the 1980s, when East Brunswick was growing at a very fast pace, the ethnic and religious mix changed radically, and at that time, because of some differences and problems in the community, ultimately the East Brunswick Human Relations Council came into being. I was a founding member of that, and that's met on a regular basis and has addressed all different types of issues. The other organization that comes to my mind is the East Brunswick Youth Council. That was really born through the efforts of the East Brunswick Clergy Association early on, and has served a very important aspect of our community since then. So it's a myriad of different types of activities that we have.
So we may not see, it's kind of behind the scenes activity that gives birth to other important organizations. Where do you see the Clergy Council's role now, Reverend Rack, moving forward?
Well, one of the things that we want to do is a program that the Clergy Council did just before I arrived, which was offering a series of visits organized in each different congregation or religious society so that people could come and learn about that particular religion and what the beliefs are, what the celebrations and rituals are, the cycle of life in that particular religion. And it was a way to have a hands-on conversation rather than just reading it in a book. You actually visit the church, congregation, temple, and hear directly from the people who are involved in it. And it was a wonderful way to connect to the community. And that was very successful. It was probably about 8 years ago now. And so we've been talking over the last 2 years of reviving it. The problem is everyone's busy schedules. It's so hard to find the right time. But that's one of the things I think that was one of those programs that really provide an important outreach into the community and help knit us closer together. And so that's one of the things I hope we can do more of, to try to find more ways to connect our communities in addition to connecting each other as clergy persons.
Now, what if lay people are interested in helping the council? Is there a role for them as well, or you're talking about maybe volunteers helping with some of these future projects? Or?
Well, just for me to mention, it's very interesting that you asked that question, and perhaps there are members of the East Brunswick community who might be interested in this. I brought an idea that came from a member of our congregation to our last Clergy Association meeting, and his idea was to form a community interfaith orchestra. And hoping that both adults and young people from the different churches and synagogues would come together on a regular basis and practice together and put on at least an annual concert. And music teaches tolerance and respect for one another, and that's something that's just in the discussion phase right now.
That's a wonderful idea. Yeah. I mean, and I guess we're lucky in that East Brunswick is home to so many cultures, yet we all have an agreement to learn and understand from one another. I know that hasn't always been the case throughout our history. How has the Clergy Council helped to make that a possibility here in East Brunswick over the years? Do you see a role for the Clergy Council in that?
Well, the Clergy Council was very active in the mid-1980s as the township was growing, because there were a lot of prejudicial activities and anti-tolerant activities, and the Clergy Council began responding to these hatred acts on an individual basis. We would send 1, 2, or 3 clergy people to the individuals' homes, and we cooperated with the East Brunswick Police Department. And then at the time, we brought in an organization called the, I think it's called the Organization of Christians and Jews from New York, and they told us what we could do and showed us how we could do it and how we could bring people together. And that's really what gave birth to the East Brunswick Human Relations Council. And the Human Relations Council moved very quickly at that time and has been a very important force here in the town. And I think people today are able to live together with greater respect because of the early work of the Clergy Association.
So laid the foundation for what we enjoy today. So maybe you could each tell us a little bit about your congregation, some of the special aspects of your group and your tradition. So Father Mark, would you start for us?
Sure. In our church, actually, we have a group. It's called Mission Agabi. The word Agabi is a Greek word, means love. The whole concept or the whole main service or main mission is just to go out, help our community. And one of the activities we do every year, we go out around the church and neighbors, if they need any, if they have leaves, so we can rig the leaves, the kids would like to be involved. And I love actually when Susie said, it's one of our goals actually to have the people and the youth interfere with us, help with us, and that will create actually more unity among all of us, really. Mission Agabi also does activity like we have a lot of newcomer coming, so we help them how to establish, how to start a new home, and we help them. Also, we have also for needy, and even crisis like what happened in Newtown, and we always how to, as a community, be one together to pray for them and support to them and do whatever it takes actually to bring unity among all of us.
And do you have a website for your church?
Yes, our church website, which is www.saint-mira.net.
Thank you so much. Reverend?
In our congregation, one of the things we do as Unitarian Universalists, we're on the liberal end of religious traditions and have always had a focus on social justice and justice issues. And we also have a reputation for talking a lot and a lot of discussion without a lot of doing. So we're always looking for ways to do and to do things in the community, in our own congregation, in the surrounding community, but also in the wider world. And one of the things I'm proud about our congregation is that when we take up our collection every Sunday, everything that we collect, we call it cash and basket, that isn't designated to go directly to the congregation is donated outside to either charitable groups or other action groups that represent our values and principles. And in doing so, it's not only just the giving away of the money, it's the learning that we do when we take that action. And so we identify something like Hurricane Sandy relief, things that were organized either in the state of New Jersey or through the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, where we're giving money directly, but we're also finding other ways to serve through that, and by learning more about the issue and by finding other avenues. And what it also does is inspire the congregants to look for ways to get involved, and then they come back to me and say, you know, I found out this, and maybe we can get involved in that. And so it's a very organic kind of process, even though it's just taking up the collection on Sunday.
And for those that want to find out more about your organization?
www.unitariansociety.org. The new website is currently under construction. We should have it unveiled in the new year.
Excellent. And Rabbi?
Well, in our religion, we like to say that action creates stronger belief. And we have a Hebrew term which is called mitzvot. And mitzvot means doing good deeds and caring about others. And we feel that we have a responsibility in our community, in the world, to practice good deeds on a very regular basis. And so we encourage our members to practice mitzvot, the practice of good deeds. And with the practice of good deeds, we begin first with our families, and then our communities, and then we reach out to the world itself. We believe that it's very important to try to make this world a better place for all of humankind, and that's a major focus of our activities.
Now, Rabbi Milgrim is retiring this coming year, and after many, many years of service.
Yes.
And you have many fond memories, I imagine, of your time. Maybe you could share with us something from, I guess, an activity or a fond memory that you come to mind as you reflect.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking. I am completing 40 years of service to Temple B'nai Shalom and the East Brunswick community. And I must say that those 40 years have went by ever so quickly. I've participated in all different types of life cycle functions with our congregants over the years. Most of them, thank God, have been wonderful and exciting. And then in the life cycle, there are also those that bring to us moments of sadness. And so I like to say that that with my congregation, we have cried together and we have laughed together. Before we came this day together, you asked me about the possibility of a humorous anecdote, and I'll share with you one thing. It's really a temple secret, but I'm sure nobody will make this public. But when I first came to Temple B'nai Shalom, we were a new community. We were a fledgling congregation. We had just begun to grow, and we had not yet gotten to a point where we had an annual budget. And so our Board of Trustees, our Board of Governance, would vote on every expenditure that we would have to make. And for our holy days, the very first holy days, we play a musical instrument that's very important to the ritual of our service, which is called a shofar. Okay, so prior to the High Holy Days, our congregation did not yet own a shofar, and so our ritual vice president stood up and he says, "I'm making a motion at the Board of Trustees that we get a shofar for our new rabbi." And so upon hearing this, another member of the congregation stood up and said, "But why does our rabbi need a chauffeur? He's a young man and should be able to drive himself." So at least I found it funny at the time. I think the most poignant moment came with 9/11. The day after 9/11, we had a service in our synagogue, and the sanctuary of our synagogue was completely filled. We had almost 1,000 people, and everybody came to the temple because they needed to find a place of belonging, and they needed to find some reason for existence, and to find some inner peace. So I think that, unfortunately, that which happened on 9/11 brought the congregation together at a moment which was spiritually very, very important, and we all prayed together with such fervor and love at that time. So that was really the most poignant moment of my career here.
And it's been a meaningful tenure, like you said, when the temple started, it was just the beginning when you were there, when you started. Where do you see the legacy that you leave for the temple, and where it's going to go from here?
Well, Temple B'nai Shalom has become a very important force, not only in East Brunswick, but all of Middlesex County. We really are the bastion of liberal Judaism in our area, and I think it's very very important that our synagogue continue to serve in that role. I mean, it is a community temple. East Brunswick and the greater East Brunswick area is our catchment area, and those people who identify with Judaism not only find our synagogue to be very welcome, very welcoming, but it's also, it becomes their second home. And we like to say that anyone who wants to be part of our community is part of our extended family.
Now, as a whole, the council has been very active in times when the area has been in distress, Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Irene. What's the role of the Clergy Council when there are these kind of natural disasters and that we've recently been having quite often, it seems? Reverend Rack?
Well, just thinking back to Superstorm or Hurricane Sandy, the response was to connect and check in with each other. How are you doing? Because we had a meeting scheduled that week and nobody had power, and we were, quote, powerless, unquote. But we realized, of course, we weren't powerless at all, and we rescheduled our meeting. But the first business was to check in. How are you doing? How's your congregation doing? I think had we had a different kind of storm experience, we would have had a very different response. But the response was there to each other. And also in thinking about, for the Thanksgiving service, where to donate our collection for that, immediately it was, how can we help our community in this time of this natural disaster? And I think that's one of the main reasons, the main ways that our Clergy Council comes together, not to go out there and fix everything, because we can't, but to support one another and do what we can and find the best way for us and our congregations and institutions to help others and to be a responsive group.
And the mayor has mentioned that all three of your congregations have always been very helpful to the community in times of need through donations, through volunteers and things like that. So I imagine that those people from your congregation will continue in this wonderful light. And those that I guess are unaffiliated can reach out to the council or reach out to your congregations if they too want to volunteer in these times of need.
Certainly, yeah.
Definitely.
So, Father Mark, tell us a little bit about your thoughts about the council and where it's going to go forward from here. You're an active member.
For sure. Number one, I love the yearly activity that we do every year, Thanksgiving prayer. It brings us together. Actually, I've been thinking about, I love the second thought, which is, Susan said, to just introduce us to the different congregation. Number three, maybe we have to think about really how to deal with crisis. And when there is, especially when we just talk about Sandy, and remember our church also, what we did, we contacted the mayor. We felt, what should we do to our community, especially so many people have no power. Some of the elder even have nowhere to go. For our church, we had electricity. I contacted the mayor, and we did open our church as a shelter. And honestly, that was one of the best experiences happened since I became a priest, to see different people come into our church, and we opened the shelter from 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock. And it was nice to have everybody around. All of us really share a story together, different color, different face, everyone is different. And I think that's one of our goals, how to help our community to be one always and support them in time of crisis.
Now, speaking of time of crisis, we've had a crisis here in the United States in Newtown, Connecticut. It's on the minds of all people everywhere around the world. As parents, we wonder how to approach this with our children. Maybe you can give us some guidance on that, Reverend Rack, as president of the Clergy Council. How do we approach this with our children, and if we do, how so?
You know, part of that is going to be every parent's call. Every different families want to approach it differently. However, with our 24-hour news cycle, you can't avoid it. And so what we can do is help the families and the adults in our congregations, giving them resources on how to talk with children and your family deal with a crisis like this that is not on our doorstep, but very close in our hearts. And the other little piece of advice that I read somewhere in these last days is from Fred Rogers, who said when he talked to his mother about things that really frightened him in a scary situation like this or in a very deadly situation, And he said that his mother told him to look for the helpers when there's an emergency like this, and that there is awful things happening. Look for the people who are helping, because there is always good present in the most evil situations, in the most dangerous situations. And I think we all know that from different experiences that we've all had in our lives. When you react, there are helpers everywhere. And so even though there are bad things in the world, there is still good, and we must always focus on that as well, and remember that we all carry that in our hearts.
Father, how are you speaking to your congregation about this?
I survived 9/11. Actually, I was one of the last person walking out of Building 1. And to see what happened to the very innocent children in Newtown, Connecticut, that was very sad, and actually put so many memory to me. And we talked to our children actually in the church. On Friday night also we had a special prayer meeting. We prayed for all the innocent children that died. We prayed that may God repose them in heaven. And also prayed for the parents, how to handle this kind of situation. It's very tough when you have a young innocent child to go through this tough experience. I remember during 9/11 I had 2 children, Mark and Rebecca. Mark was 5 and Rebecca was 3. And also I had to talk to them about really, some people are really can do harm to us, some horrible people outside, but also on the other hand there is a great people that they can help us. And let's look at the good. In the meantime, how to accept what happened and pray about it. And we believe that our life here, it doesn't matter how many years you live, we're still going to live. How to accept. Acceptance is very important for the children. Even in our church, we talk to the kids on Sunday school how to accept what happened and how to pray for them. Pray for the kids that they died, and also pray for the parents, because prayer will give them peace and will give them comfort.
Thank you. And Rabbi, how do you counsel your congregation?
Well, as we began services Friday evening, we had a moment of special prayer for the tragedy that happened in Newtown, and then on Saturday morning we had a large number of preteens attending our service. So we took a moment out and had a round table, so to speak, discussion with our 12-year-olds about evil and about that which happens at times in lives, and also about the goodness in the world. And sometimes as parents we want to shield our children from everything, but as Reverend Rack mentioned, we're living in a world of instant communication, and sometimes we're not able to shield our children, and sometimes we feel that our children are so young that they don't need to hear about this, and sometimes if they hear about these evil situations or evil happenings from their parents or from their clergy leaders, it's better than hearing it from a peer or hearing it as a rumor. And then we emphasize that each and every person is loved and should be loved, and we're all God's children, and as God's children, each of us is different, and each of us is unique, and each of our souls are eternal. And we pray together. Not only do we pray together for those who passed, but we pray for our first responders and the relatives, so that they the first responders have the continued ability to go forward and do that which is necessary to protect the community. And we pray for the parents and relatives to have the strength to go on. In fact, one of the little children who passed in this tragedy had a twin sister who lived, and who knows the type of support they're going to need in the future.
Well, we definitely send our prayers from East Brunswick to those in Newtown, Connecticut. And thank you so much for sharing the special and important work that the Clergy Council does here every day in East Brunswick. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching. This is Barbara Reiss reporting for Totally East Brunswick.